Mac Jones, his career in the NFL is basically over.
You watch Georgia. Are they perfect? Watch Michigan. Are they perfect? Florida State ain't perfect either. They just have a perfect record.
This is a team that gave up 70 points. The first team that ever gave up 70 points in an NFL game since 1966. And yet this team could make the playoffs.
Down go the holier than thous.
That's right.
Husky reports that he is on his way to the Milwaukee Bucks.
He's not getting his happy ending this time.
Okay, today is Tuesday, November 28th. We got a great show today, guys. Bob Ferrante covers FSU, all things FSU. Going to break down the Seminoles with him in lieu of tonight's college football playoff rankings that are going to be unraveled. Break down their season they've had so far, and then especially going into the next week's ACC championship game and the playoff rankings, like I just said in general. Great interview with him coming up. Going to break down NFL week 12 like we always do, closest game, most intriguing storyline, all that like we always do. I do want to touch base though real fast though, guys, on Tom Brady's comments that he made last week about the NFL being a mediocre product. I know we kind of already touched on it very, very briefly last week, but I did want to go through it a little bit further more in opening today. What are you guys' thoughts on it in general? Like I said, Zach, I know you already kind of alluded to it last week, what your thoughts on it as well, but I think it is an interesting topic of conversation just in general with how the NFL has been this year. Penalties have been a big issue. NFL is changing. I mean, then scoring's down. We'll get into that. Play calling's a lot different now. A lot, protect the players more. Calls are being made to protect the players more. What all do you guys think about, these comments? Zach, do you have anything else to add? Justin, do you want to add anything? Like, what else do you guys have to really say about these comments and Tom Brady saying NFL kind of, declining in value a little bit?
I don't think he's off base because I don't think there's as many great quarterbacks as there were in his era. I mean, think about this. 10 years ago, we had Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers. Like, every big-time team had an elite quarterback. Eli Manning was even in that conversation. We don't really have that now. We've got a couple of guys that are obviously great, but this season in particular, just think of the injuries. Aaron Rodgers out for the season, Deshaun Watson out for the season, Joe Burrow out for the season. When you don't have great quarterback play, the league tends to be a little bit boring. I mean, so I get what he's saying. I don't think this is the week to say that the NFL is boring because we had a lot of great games yesterday. But I totally understand his point because if you don't have elite quarterback play, then, sometimes it becomes an unwatchable mess. Just look at, the Patriots-Giants game yesterday, for instance. But, no, I don't think he's entirely off base. And if anybody's qualified to make that kind of comment, it's obviously Tom Brady.
Yeah. League definitely did not like him making that comment. Not somebody like him for sure. Scoring, though, has been down. Fourth consecutive season in the NFL. Teams are combining to score just 43.3 points per game. That's down from 43.8 last season and 45.9 in 2021. The league is on pace for its lowest scoring season on average since 2009 when teams combined for 42.9 points a game. Did want to bring it up too, just in light of Alex Smith's comments. I think he was on ESPN. There's some Sunday NFL Countdown on ESPN. I think he was kind of snapping back a little bit at these comments yesterday by Brady. He's saying quarterback play is at an all-time high. He scoring is down because defensive linemen are much better than they've always been. They're probably the best they've ever been in his entire career, he said. So that's another thing to keep in mind too. But I don't like you said, Zach, I don't think Tom Brady's comments were completely offline. I do think the game is changing a little bit though, and a lot of the play calling schemes and the coaching decisions is leading to lower scoring games, which is a good thing and also a bad thing at the same time, of course, like we just said.
I'll say this, too, about defenses this year. This is a much better year for defenses. And last year, it was better for offenses, but for defenses this year, it's been better. That's what I will say. But the offense, I feel like there is better quarterback play than there was 30 years ago. I think we can agree on that. Offensive play, too. But this isn't a defensive-first league like it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even when Brady first stepped into the league. I mean, some of the penalties are completely uncalled for, like roughing the passer. And the thing with roughing the passer is it's way too enforced. It's way too enforced on defensive side of the ball, and with the roughing the passer penalties, they may have to stop calling that penalty, to be honest with you. Even if it's, intentional, I would say that there should be some intentional calls and whatnot, but there's too many penalties. There's too many uncalled for penalties. And Aaron Rodgers kind of echoed the same thing. He said, well, yeah, it's a softness, not just in the league, but outside of sports, and, not going to get into the whole societal thing and whatnot. But, this should have been for the league to do this, they need to start calling less penalties too. And then the quarterback play should obviously be better. Like I said last week, there should be more of a grace period for rookie quarterbacks in the league. First round quarterbacks, especially, you don't need to play them. You don't need to play them for the first game and just throw them out there. Just give them some time. Give them some time to develop the playbook. And we've seen the Jets do that. We've seen a lot of teams do that. But I don't think it's that bad of a mediocre product. I think the NFL needs to get things in order. Again, the TV ratings are up, right? The TV ratings are up. The money is up in the league, obviously.
It's all that matters.
And that matters. So. And that obviously matters. Ratings are the first
one
thing
of the biggest things Tom Brady said in his quotes, just being about the play calling, like you said, Justin, just how the play calling is a lot more predicated on protecting players and how players need to protect themselves because, you've heard a lot of people say this too. It wasn't just Tom Brady. Many other players have came out and said this in the past as well about how the game used to be a lot tougher and refs weren't looking out for players back then when they played. So I think a lot of players are kind of looking at the game now and it might be a little bit more soft. Given the fact that, a lot of play calls, like you said, Justin, are predicated on protecting the players and keeping them safe. But at the end of the day, who knows? It's players a lot faster, a lot stronger now than they were even 10 years ago, especially a lot faster. So maybe it is nice to have play calls to, calling fouls, I should say, to protect players. But at the end of the day, I still think it's good to have things in place to protect players because at the end of the day, if players get injured, well, then they're not going to play, and then that's going to be a bad product as well. So, especially on the quarterback side of the ball.
Right. I think the league is developing. As we're talking about, the league is developing into a more protective league for the players and, more protective here and more protective there. But I think at the same time, it's a little bit overblown. And at the same time, I think the league is evolving. It is evolving from what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But at the same time, I don't think it should stop evolving, but I don't think it should become flag football, which I don't think it'll ever be. As I know that some former players have said that. I know some analysts even has said, and fans have said, this is going to be flag football.
Save it for the.
It better not be. It better not be because
the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl.
I
do want to move on, guys. Before we move on to our recap of week 12 overall, I do want to move on to just some coaching fires. Biggest one being obviously Frank Reich out for the Panthers. I don't really know what else to make of this. The Panthers have to do something. They're now 1-10 leading into next week 13. Obviously wasn't getting it done. I don't know who else will get it done for the Panthers. I don't know who else they go after next. I don't know what else they do going forward. But even just to make the fans happy, they had to move on from Frank Reich.
Yeah, it's an organizational issue.
Well, I think it is. It's an organizational issue. And to be honest, Frank Reich is not the main problem in Carolina. He was not the main problem. This is a management issue, and taking Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud is a big mistake. He wanted C.J.
Forgot about
Stroud.
that,
Frank Reich wanted C.J. Stroud.
Yeah,
over
that was
Bryce
the owner.
Young,
David Tepper might be the worst
that is
owner
gonna
in the
come back to
NFL.
bite
He's
the
making all these
Panthers.
personnel decisions. None of them have worked. The head coaches have not worked. The trades certainly have not worked. And not only are they 1-10, they're 1-10. They don't get their number one pick. If the Panthers end up with the worst record in the league, it's going to be the Bears pick. So the Panthers really don't have a whole lot of room to get better. And that's the thing. When you make the wrong decision at quarterback, it affects everything about your franchise. If they had C.J. Stroud, everything would be different. Now, I don't know if C.J. would be as good in Carolina as he is in Houston because I think Houston has more weapons. But certainly the Panthers would be in a lot better position than they are right now. I think this is on ownership. I just happen to think Frank Reich is the fall guy for this, and he shouldn't have to be. I don't think Frank Reich's a great coach. I'm a Colts fan. I'm certainly aware of Frank Reich and what he did not do in Indianapolis, but I am not going to say that Frank Reich is the big issue in Carolina. It's the owner.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said.
Yeah, the owner, obviously, as we just mentioned. But another thing I was going to say, which I could absolutely see them doing, and this will be bogus for what we just talked about with the league and being a mediocre product with teams tanking too.
I think they are.
I could see the Panthers going into a tank mode like the Sixers did.
You mean next year?
back
Even
in the
next,
process.
because obviously they
Basically,
are already. They
they're
can't
gonna
tank
They're
anymore
gonna
now.
tank,
But
yeah.
yeah, no,
Next year.
that's going back to what you said too, Zach. I mean, that was
Yeah.
kind of my point. He's a fall guy.
Yeah.
I think they had to just do something because to make the fans, give the fans something this season. Did you think they'd be this bad though? I didn't think they'd be this bad. Not 1-10.
I did not think it would be this bad, and Justin said it right. Frank Reich wanted
No.
C.J. Stroud. That's why, as a head coach, sometimes you're at the mercy of your owner. If you have a good owner that will listen to you, then you're going to be in good shape. If you don't, then this is exactly what happens to you.
Yeah, especially being in the NFC South, I did not think they would be this bad. Maybe.
Well, he'll go back to Philadelphia probably because Nick Sirianni and he was with the Eagles in 2017 with the Super Bowl run and
As a coordinator, maybe.
he
Yeah.
has a lot of respect for the
Other one,
ownership
Jack.
there.
Yeah, something. Jack Del Rio
does that mean
also
Jeff
out.
Saturday is going to be the head
Special
coach of the Panthers. We saw Frank Reich get fired midseason last year, and it turned out to be Jeff Saturday. So who is the
who
ESPN
knows?
analyst that's never coached before that the Carolina Panthers are going to go get to replace Frank Reich?
Yeah.
There you go. There it is.
He's wanted to.
Ryan Clark. There you go. Yeah.
RG3 play.
Yeah.
They'll be at RG3
bring
play
in Ryan
quarterback
Clark
too.
and go 1-16, and you still won't get the
He wants
first
to.
pick.
He's auditioning
Jack
for
Del.
the Browns.
Yeah.
They might
Jack Del
want to take
Rio.
him up on it the way he's going.
Yeah, or at least something. I mean, yeah, they need somebody to help. Bryce Young, Bryce Young.
Jack Del Rio got fired. We can get to that.
Yeah, he's out from the Commanders as well. That's my only other coaching carousel I really have from this past weekend. I don't know what that's going to really do for the Commanders.
Nothing. It should have been
if it's going to.
Rivera's
Yeah,
gotta go.
it should have been. It should have been. Do you think that's just like they're just waiting at this point until next off season at this point?
It seems like they are. This would have been the time to fire him because you have 10 days between playing on Thanksgiving on Thursday and then your next game, which is Sunday. So you have 11 days. That would have been the time if you're going to fire a coach in mid-season. That's the time to do it, and they didn't do that, and I would have.
Especially because.
Well, it sounds like when we had what's his name, Adam Epstein, on from Washington, he said that they might promote Ron Rivera to the front office. So I could see that happening. I could even see them, promoting Bieniemy to be the head coach because Sam Howell has developed under Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. I could see that for the Commanders, but I'm shocked that it wasn't Ron Rivera and instead it was Jack Del Rio. But I also could see them just wiping the slate clean in Washington this offseason. You got a new ownership group. And
that's a great point you make as far as Eric Bieniemy, because that's another reason why I would have fired Ron Rivera. Give Eric Bieniemy 6 games or so to find out if he's head coach material and give him an opportunity to kind of learn on the job, give him a chance to audition for the job.
Yeah, you forget about that, how important it is to kind of make that audition because why hire a coach or even elevate a coach in the offseason without even knowing how he's going to do it. It's a good point, Zach. At least let him play some games, finish out the season, see if he can be the guy going into next season, or if they need to make a even further change in the offseason. But yeah, we'll see. New ownership group. I definitely think he'll be gone, Rivera, in the offseason, especially if the Commanders continue to play the way they've been playing. They'll have somebody else at head coach in short time. Let's move on, though, guys. Break down the games from this past weekend, Week 12. We're going to start with the closest game of the week, like we always do. Zach, what is your closest game of the week?
Yeah, I feel like we're going to bring this game up a few times. The Bills-Eagles game.
Yeah.
Maybe the game of the NFL season so far. What an unbelievable game that was. Jalen Hurts had an unbelievable second half. Josh Allen was spectacular throughout, and if Gabe Davis runs the right route or if Josh Allen throws the right ball, they win that game. Jake Elliott with one of the best kicks I've ever seen, a 59-yard field goal. That's tough in any weather condition, but especially in the pouring rain and the grass being the way that it was yesterday. That's one of the best kicks I've ever seen. It was fantastic. The Eagles, they find ways to win every week, and they're not dominating the way that they did last year, but they're 10-1. They find ways to win close games. And then the last 6 days, they've beaten Patrick Mahomes, they've beaten Josh Allen. Can't really argue with that. And they win games when their defense plays great. They win games when their defense did not play great like they did yesterday. They did not play all that great. But Jalen Hurts stepped up in the second half. He had 50 yards, or he had a miserable first half, but the second half he was about flawless. That game was just you knew as soon as Buffalo had to settle for a field goal, you knew the Eagles were going to drive down and win that game. That was, I think, the best game of the season so far.
19 yards in the first half, Jalen Hurts. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. If this could, like you said, Zach, this could be a lot of things, but this is going to be my closest game too. I think it's the best game of the year so far. Personally, I think a lot of people would say that not just Eagles, obviously, but the NFL. This was the best game of the year so far, despite the weather. And it was a tale of two halves for Eagles again, kind of like Kansas City. Jalen Hurts was pretty much playing himself out of MVP contention, conversation in the first half, but then ended up, being the clear front runner by the end of the game. I mean, I think he had 200 yards or something, like 200 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns in the second half.
Yeah,
and like I said,
only 3 of his 4 passes were touchdowns in the second half at one point.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that graphic too. Yeah, he also had 2 rushing touchdowns too. Including that 12-yard runoff to win it as well in overtime. So yeah, but like I said, Eagles played very, very bad first half, and then they played really well in the second half. Very similar to Kansas City in that they were able to get this game winner. I was, like you said, Zach, I was really surprised by that field goal by Jack Elliott to Jack Elliott, right?
Jake
I think
Elliott.
To Jake Elliott. Jack Elliott, I think, is on the Philadelphia
We always
Union.
talk about
That's
Justin Tucker being the best
Jake
kicker in the
Elliott.
league, and he probably is, but Jake Elliott's not that far behind.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 59, I think, was the total yardage, and in the rain, and it was just a dart too. I thought it missed at first. The weather was so bad, I couldn't even see the ball when he kicked it because the cameras were so fogged up, you couldn't even see the ball when he kicked. I didn't even know it went in until the refs put their hands up. But yeah, just amazing kick by him to send it into overtime, and then just great game overall. And Justin, is this going to be your closest game of the week? I'm sure it's at least shootout if nothing else. Yeah,
Easily, yes. Easily the closest game. Probably easily the shootout. This was the game of the year and the game of the week, as we were alluding to before. I mean, the Eagles in the first half, they didn't get a lot of run plays in as much, but in the second half, they started to run the ball more. They started to adjust. Jalen Hurts brings this team back from down 17-7, just like he did in Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes and now against Josh Allen on his home field. It's winning 37-34. It's a big win for the Eagles, and we know why. I mean, they're the best team in the league
0-6
right
Josh
now
Allen now
at
in his
10-4.
career in overtime.
Yeah, how big was that, by the way? If the Bills won, they were holding the 7th seed. Now it's gonna be really difficult for them to make the playoffs because they've got Kansas City still coming. They've got Dallas still coming in a couple weeks. They got to play the Dolphins. This could be a game that keeps them out of the playoffs.
No, for sure. This was, I mean, every game now, including this one, is pretty much a must win for the Bills heading down to make the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, he just continues to play really well. But all things considered, took care of the ball decently well too this game, and they just couldn't end up coming away with the victory. Nick Sirianni did say, team does not panic in the second half. Showed this for the Eagles. They definitely did not panic despite, a back and forth game, despite a bad first half. They did not panic. James Bradbury had the best game of his season. Came up with five pass breakups in this game, was targeted 15 times and snagged an interception for the Eagles as well. Jalen Carter also played an amazing game for the Eagles. So defense doing its job, ended up getting the win for the Eagles. Just an all-out team victory for the Eagles. Great win. Good to see them winning ugly, winning hard, because that's going to be really important, obviously, once the playoffs come up. Most intriguing storyline, Zach. What was your most intriguing storyline of this past weekend?
Well, the Jacksonville Jaguars basically clinched the AFC South yesterday because they are up 2 games now, and unless they collapse, they're probably going to win that. And if you look at the AFC, it's basically all 8-3 and 9-3 teams. The Ravens hold the number 1 seed because they played one more game than everybody else. But it's going to be really interesting to see who gets that number 1 seed. And can somebody make Patrick Mahomes have to play on the road, which he's never had to do in the postseason? The Jaguars are taking a step closer to that. They've got a pretty favorable schedule from here out. They're 8-3. They're 2 games up on the AFC South. Trevor Lawrence had one of the best games of the season yesterday. And, that's a Texan team that dominated them earlier this year. And the fact they were able to get that win on the road, that was a fantastic game, too. It got overshadowed by the Eagles and the Bills later on, but that was a great game that ended up on a doink on the field goal hitting the crossbar. But that's a huge win for the Jaguars, 8-3. And, we all talk about the Chiefs, the Ravens, as far as being the best teams in the AFC. I don't think we talk about the Jags enough.
No, definitely a good game. I mean, they definitely fly under the radar, especially at home. They're a fantastic home game. CJ Stroud did play really good. That's my only other takeaway from the game. I mean, obviously, he just continues to play amazing. 3 for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. Has over 3,200 yards of total passing on the season, close to 3,300 yards. He moved past Justin Herbert for the most in NFL history by a rookie in his first 11 games. He also became the first rookie in NFL history to throw for 300 yards in 4 consecutive games as well. So, yeah, I mean, he just continues to play amazing this year. And like we said earlier, Panthers could have had him. But
I want to stay in the AFC South real quick, and it's probably not going to come up in some of the other categories, but I want to give Shane Steichen some love. I mean, the Colts are 6-5, and they're doing this with a backup quarterback with Gardner Minshew, and they're winning games week in, week out. And right now, they would actually make the playoffs if the season ended today. So I think he deserves a ton of credit, maybe Coach of the Year in the NFL for what he's doing with a roster. It doesn't have a great receiver, doesn't really have a great defense, does have Jonathan Taylor, but they're doing this with a backup quarterback. The AFC South, everybody thought might be the worst division in football. Well, you got the Jags, really good team. Texans have been maybe the surprise, and the Colts are flying really under the radar. So the AFC South's been a lot better than people thought it was going to be.
No, yeah, I was just watching games yesterday, and the infographic came up, obviously, what they always do when they show the playoff, contentions for each of
the season ended today,
Yeah, and they were 6-5.
Yeah.
Like, when did the Colts become 6-5? They were literally, I literally remember saying to myself, like, they are the sneakiest 6-5 team ever.
Really
like, I never even, like, no one talks about them, and they're one of the, they're about 500, which
they did beat Houston earlier the year. That's why they are currently in the playoffs, because they hold the tiebreaker.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't know when that happened.
Yeah, week 2.
Yeah, good for them. No, I don't know when they became 6-5, but hey,
yesterday.
It's good for them. Yeah. My most intriguing storyline, I'm gonna go to the NFC now. I'm gonna Cowboys. I'm kind of curious with the Cowboys. I don't really know what to really make about the Cowboys. They're kind of like the Dolphins a little bit in a sense, and in that they haven't really played anyone really good this year. I mean, their season has been actually, I mean, their record or schedule, so far has been actually pretty easy, all things considered, for the Cowboys. They've only played 2 really tough games, 2 teams above 500 this entire year. That was the Eagles and the 49ers, and they, of course, lost both of those games. They do blow out the teams that they should blow out. Obviously, they killed the Giants twice. They killed the Commanders. They killed the Rams. 40+ points against those teams, all 4 of those teams. But again, these are teams below 500, and when they play against good teams, they don't win them. So I think Dak Prescott, he played awesome on Thanksgiving. He had 331 yards for 4 touchdowns. Like I said, he absolutely balled out. They killed the Commanders, like I just said, as well on Thanksgiving. But they have a stretch coming up here where they play the Eagles at home, the Bills and Dolphins away and the Lions at home again. This is going to be a huge litmus test for the Cowboys to see how legit they are. I need to see them, like the Dolphins, I need to see them beat an actual playoff contending team and not just kind of stomp on these lower tier teams. And let's see what they're made of coming up in the next, they play the Seahawks obviously coming up, I think it's Thursday night, but then the next 4 games after that, like I said, Eagles, Dolphins, Bills, and Lions. Let's see how they do. Justin, what was your most intriguing storyline of the week?
My most intriguing storyline is the Seattle Seahawks. What happened to them?
Yep.
I knew they were going to lose this game to the Niners, but not by that much. Seattle might be falling apart here in the second half of the year, and I'm not impressed with the Seattle Seahawks. I thought they could be a borderline contender, but my most intriguing storyline what's happening to the Seahawks.
Geno Smith was one of the quarterbacks known for taking care of the ball very, very well over the last couple, 3-4 games. He's been having some turnover problems. Defense hasn't been playing as good as they've been playing, and offense has been struggling as well. So, Seahawks definitely on a slump.
Also, another thing I'll say, too, about the Russell Wilson trade, now that the Broncos are starting to have some success, they're now 6-5. They're 1 game back, 1 game out of the playoff picture in the AFC. But I will say this, I still think Seattle did win the trade just a bit, but because they will have some first-round draft picks from Seattle, and so far they got Witherspoon, who's actually playing very well. I mean, he might be the defensive rookie of the year, might be one of the two, might be him or Jalen Carter. But Seattle, I think they're underrated in the future. But this year, I think they're falling apart. But they might need to start looking at another quarterback, and they might need to start. They may need to keep Geno Smith. Obviously, I think so, but they could do a good job at developing a quarterback. Again, it is Pete Carroll. He is a good head coach, but I still think Seattle did win the trade, but I think the Broncos are starting to catch some fire now with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. What do you think? Do you think the Broncos and who do you think won the trade?
It all depends on how Seattle uses those draft picks.
But then
if they use them correctly, then they won the trade. But, I mean, the Broncos, that came out of nowhere. That is one of the most surprising in-season turnarounds that I've seen in a long, long time, and give them full credit. I mean, they were 1-5, and we were talking about we're the worst team in the league, and now all of a sudden they're in the playoff hunt. So I still would probably give a slight edge to Seattle, but it's not as nearly as much as I thought it was after last year.
No, I've said it 2-3 episodes ago. I think they're going to make the playoffs, the Broncos, because they were playing really well. The defense and Russell Wilson started to come together at the same exact time. And Justin, if he continues to play like he plays now, you could make an argument that the Broncos might have won the trade, because they obviously desperately needed a quarterback at that time. And, he's right now leading them from probably the worst team in the league to a playoff contending team. So the Broncos so far doing very well in the trade. Did not look like that way last year, and then obviously the beginning of this year either. But so far, no, it's turning out awesome for the Broncos. We'll get into that game a little bit later.
I actually think the Broncos and the Texans could be wild cards in the AFC.
No, I don't either.
An AFC North team, or I don't think there'll be 3 AFC North teams. I think the Broncos and Texans are going to get wild cards, and potentially even
I think
3
the AFC North.
South teams.
I still don't trust the Steelers and the Browns. At some point, you just accumulate too many injuries.
Yep. Surprise of the week, Zach. What was your surprise of the week?
Yeah, it's got to be the Packers going to Detroit and housing the Lions. What a performance by Jordan Love. This was his coming out party. I think now we can look at Jordan Love as the future of the franchise. I don't know if he's going to turn out to be Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, but I think the Packers are done as far as they're not picking a quarterback this year, because Jordan Love has showed some promise these last couple weeks. Christian Watson had a big day. It really started on the opening play when they threw the ball deep, and Christian Watson had like a 60-yard catch and run, and that was basically setting the tone for the entire game. The Lions got a real problem, guys, because they've turned the ball over 7 times in the last 2 games. You cannot win at that rate if you're turning the ball over. Their defense has been a little bit suspect. I'm starting to be a little concerned about the Lions. They're going to win the NFC North, but I don't know if I look at them as a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. This is actually my surprise of the week too. I don't know what happened with Jared Goff. I mean, going, what was it, like week 7, week 8, something like that. He had the record. Like he had the record for most consecutive games or even pass attempts maybe without an interception. And now he's, having a very bad turnover problem. Had a career high 3 fumbles. That's not an interception, obviously, but had a career high 3 fumbles against the Packers on Thanksgiving. Jordan Love had to set the pace fast in this game to have any chance to win. He did that. First play of the game, 53-yard pass to Christian Watson that ultimately led to that scoring TD drive to Jaden Reed, that touchdown pass to Jaden Reed. So, yeah, Goff has, he has a problem with, handling the ball lately. And, that's something that's going to have to be a big, big issue covered up by the Lions going down the stretch here if they want any chance to be a playoff contending team. Jordan Love, though, I do want to touch base on him a little bit more, too. I mean, he's been playing very well lately. I mean, he finished with a career high 3 touchdowns, 22 for 32 on Thanksgiving with 268 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and including 2 of those in the first quarter to rookie Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft, like I said earlier. He had a career-long 37-yard run on a read option play in the 3rd down late in the 4th quarter that helped seal the win as well. So Jordan Love might be the guy at the Packers, especially over the last 2-3 games. Like you said, Zach, Packers might be looking for another draft option this year and not a quarterback. So that's good for the Packers.
His first 11 starts are basically the exact same as Aaron Rodgers' numbers through his first 11 starts. Not saying he's going to be Aaron Rodgers, but, that's not a bad thing.
More of a runner.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the Packers, obviously their defense played very well on Thanksgiving too. Lions went for it 5 times on 4th down and only converted it 1 time. That's actually where the Lions are probably that's been a big part of the Lions' success, is how great they are on 3rd down and 4th down. And Lions were
on 4th down.
0 for 5. Yeah, I think they converted 1 on the final
they
touchdown drive.
On the last drive, yeah. But they were 0 for their first 5. I know they faked a punt, and then a couple times they got deep and they didn't get it.
The game, I think the one they did convert, I think the game was pretty much over at that time anyhow, though. Right. But yeah, no, it's good for the Packers. Justin, what was your surprise of the week? Yeah.
This is it. Packers over the Lions. And the Lions, it's a cause for concern. I don't know if they're going to be a contender, as Zach just alluded to. But I don't know I don't think they should. I don't know if they're going to be a big contender yet. I mean, they're kind of a year behind schedule, maybe even 2 years behind schedule. Maybe even get a quarterback and develop him under Goff. Maybe not yet, but I still think the Lions are not the favorite in the NFC. Obviously, still think it's Philadelphia. They're going to have to go into Philly if they play the Eagles, and that environment, especially outside weather in January,
because I don't think they're going to San Francisco and winning. I don't think they're going to Philadelphia and winning, and I don't think they could go to Dallas and win either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Eagles now 2-game lead in the conference.
They could basically wrap up home field if they beat the 49ers next week.
Well, I was going to say, if they beat 49ers next week and then, maybe get one more win after that, they can start maybe potentially sitting people going into the playoffs and still have that first round bye, which would be pretty amazing.
They could. I think they could win these next 3 games.
Yes, especially considering the fact that their last 4 games. Wow, I didn't even know this. Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, and then Giants again. Yeah, Eagles. Watch out for the Eagles being able to, have a month off almost before going to the playoffs, especially if they can wrap up that conference lead early on with that win next weekend against the 49ers. Let's move on. Shootout of the week. Zach, what was your shootout of the week?
Bills-Eagles, 37-34 is the highest scoring game of the week. The offenses are fantastic. Both two great quarterbacks, two of the best in the league. I mean, Josh Allen, you got to feel steak bit because he's done everything possible to get himself in a position to win these overtime games, and his defense has let him down over and over again. But Jalen Hurts, I mean, he's rising up as probably the MVP of the league because he just every single week it seems like the Eagles are in a close game and he's coming through with a big play.
I'm actually going to go with Rams-Cardinals. Kind of a shocking shootout of the week. Not many people would think the Rams-Cardinals would be a shootout of the week, but ended up being a really intriguing game. Ended up being a really high-scoring, fun game to watch overall. Matt Stafford set a season high for TDs, threw for 229 yards and 4 touchdown passes, 2 to Tyler Higbee and 2 to Kyrie Williams. Williams had a huge game after missing his last 4 games because of that ankle injury. Like I said, he had 16 rushes, 43 yards, and 6 receptions for those 2 touchdowns, as I alluded to already as well. Los Angeles scored 30 unanswered points after falling behind 8-7 in the first quarter. The Rams, they moved the ball with ease during most of the first half and had 287 yards. Cardinals played pretty well first quarter, but then did end up struggling late in the game as well. But yeah, I mean, Rams, my shootout of the week, and solely just because of LA and how well Matt Stafford played. I mean, looking like old Matthew Stafford of old, and like I said, just playing amazing and getting the Rams a much needed win to keep their playoff chances alive. Justin, what was your shootout of the week?
Well, actually 2 games. Obviously, Bills-Eagles, as I mentioned in the beginning. I'll get to that in a minute. But Chiefs and Raiders. Chiefs-Raiders, I thought was an interesting shootout. It looked like Kansas City early on was going to lose the game. They were down 14-0 in the second quarter, and they only had 13 yards when they were down 14-0, 13 total offensive yards. I thought the Chiefs would lose, but they came back, obviously. Patrick Mahomes had 298 yards, threw for 2 touchdown passes. But the Raiders, as I've been saying, as we've been saying, the Raiders are not a bad team. They still they might need a new head coach. You hope that they don't fire Antonio Pierce. But if the Raiders can develop their team, then I think they could be a sneaky team in the AFC West. But I thought they were able to keep up with the Chiefs in this game. And the Chiefs, no wide receiver means big issues. And not having a wide receiver, I don't care if it's A.J. Brown. I don't care if it's Stephon Diggs, or not even to that elite caliber receiver. Maybe even Michael Gallup would be the number 1 receiver for the Chiefs. That's how bad their wide receiving core is. And they're still 8-3, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes leading as the starting quarterback. But also I want to get into the Bills and the Eagles again with Jalen Hurts being the first NFC quarterback, by the way, to defeat.
And going back to the Chiefs,
Rashee
Rice had the best game for the Chiefs. He caught 8 passes, 107 yards for a touchdown.
How about a Chiefs receiver actually holding on to the ball?
Yeah, no, I mean, Isaiah Pacheco, he rushed for 2 touchdowns as well. But yeah, I mean, it was the first, Zach, like you kind of alluded to, the Chiefs ended their 3-game second half scoring drought. So I mean, they passed for over just under 200 or just under 300 yards at 298. Mahomes did throw 2 touchdown passes as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a big problem for the Chiefs. I know we've already kind of touched on it at length. I mean, their wide receiver room is definitely pretty thin right now. They don't have a whole lot of options outside of Kelsey. Definitely something they're going to have to fix going down the line. And like you said, Zach, as it stands right now, and as it's looking, last third of the season here, it looked like the Chiefs for the first time in Mahomes, his first time playing in the NFL. It looks like Mahomes will not be having home field advantage throughout the playoffs and might actually have to play his first away game in the playoffs this year.
Well, they've
so
had a
we'll
couple
see.
years
But
where they weren't the 1 seed; they were the 2, but the 1 seed lost, so they ended up
True.
still hosting.
Yep. My only other thing from the Chiefs-Broncos game, if we don't get back to it, I mean, we already talked about the Broncos. They're looking really, really good lately. The Chiefs' defense does continue to dominate, though. The Chiefs held opponents to under 24 points for the 11th straight consecutive game. That's just 3 off the franchise record. They shut down the Raiders in the second half, holding them to only 113 yards after Vegas picked up over 240 yards in the first 2 quarters. So, tale of two halves for the Kansas City defense. I still think the defense for Kansas City is probably one of the most underlooked aspects of the team, just considering with, how much attention Patrick Mahomes and the offense for the Chiefs get, especially over the last 2-3 years here. Snoozer of the week. I think we're going to have all the same snoozers of the week. So, Zach, start us off with Giants, Patriots. We have to talk about it. Let's just briefly go through it a little bit. Snoozer of the week. All of us, I think, are going to have the same game. Start us off. I mean, we have to talk about it. What do you want to? I mean,
Mac Jones, his career in the NFL is basically over at this point. It's done. He's proven he's not the guy. Tommy DeVito has shown a little something these last couple weeks, but let's just say that this will not go up in Giants-Patriots history like Super Bowl 42 and Super Bowl 46. This is not exactly a game that's going to be remembered by just about anybody. The Patriots, I'm sure, are happy to lose because now they're in the mix for Caleb Williams or Drake May, perhaps sitting there at 2-9. I think they would have the 3rd or 4th pick in the draft right now. And if you're the Giants, I know some Giants fans are like, oh, we still got a chance to play. No, you don't. But this is just, if anybody watched this game, you're a better fan than I am.
I don't think many did.
Sure he is. Yeah, Tommy Cutlass
I don't think
DeVito's going to lead them to the playoffs.
I think
Sure, right.
Yeah, right. They just want a draft pick at this point. Where are they in the draft?
Yeah, right.
Where would the
they're
Giants
moving
draft
down
actually?
because they're
6
won a couple.
After this weekend.
That's it. Hey, he still lives at home.
Yeah,
with his
and
mom,
become a
so
chef
good for him,
too
I
with
guess.
Tommy DeVito.
That's
all they want.
Yeah. Might have to stay there.
Yeah. 20 minutes away from the stadium.
No. Too convenient.
Yeah.
New England currently holds 3rd next year in the draft. As New York, is 6 after this weekend, and New England is now 3rd in the draft. Bears probably won't may not get a quarterback because Fields is playing pretty good recently, and then Arizona might also not get a quarterback because Murray has actually been playing decently well too. So New England might actually be in the Caleb Williams pool. If they continue to stay where they are now and draft 3rd, and especially if they can go up to 2nd, really do bad this last third of the year, maybe get to the 2nd spot. I think they definitely would be in the running for Caleb Williams. But definitely will get a quarterback. Zach, you said Mac Jones' time at New England is over. I think it's been over. I just don't think they have anything else to really do at this point. I'm surprised he even started this game. I know he got benched originally and now I guess started this game. But Bailey Zappi also came in to replace Mac Jones. He played terribly as well. He only had 54 yards with the interception. Only semblance of offense the Patriots had all game was Ramondre Stevenson, who ran for 21 times, 98 yards, and 1 touchdown. 4 combined turnovers for both the Patriots and the Giants, which I'm actually surprised. That's actually lower than I even thought it would be, especially considering that it was a pretty ugly weather game, if I remember, all things considered. Both teams, no surprise here, did combine for 13 total punts. True battle of defense, just ugly offenses in general, and the better defense did coming through and winning this game. But overall, just very, very ugly, and they had to play eventually, I guess, especially had to play eventually, I guess. So it's luckily there were better games going on this weekend. That being said, what did we miss? I don't think we really missed many other games. 49ers Seahawks, I think we already touched on it. McCaffrey, Offensive Player of the Year, 14 touchdowns on the season so far. He's definitely in pace to win Offensive Player of the Year. Dolphins, Jets, did we touch on this? The Black Friday game too much? I don't think we really did.
I think that's what they're calling it now is the Hail Mary. So they've had the butt fumble and the Hail Mary on Thanksgiving and then Black Friday. Like that, if any play has ever symbolized the entire history of the New York Jets franchise, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, like the final seconds of the first
Welcome
half.
to the New
Jets
York
intercepted
Jets.
an attempted Hail Mary to capitalize on their newfound momentum. Instead, the Dolphins, they intercepted Boyle's pass at the 1 yard line and returned it for a 99-yard touchdown. So, Jets, continue to showcase a bad product in primetime games, especially on Black Friday when there were no other games going on.
Yeah.
Dolphins still only one win above 500, though. I kind of alluded to it earlier, kind of analogous to the Cowboys and on the NFC side. Only one win above 500, the Raiders. So I don't know what to really make of the Dolphins
not
still.
anymore because the Raiders are below 500.
True. Yeah, well, at the time, I guess. But Dolphins, they suffered a major blow, though, with Jalen Phillips. He's out for the season. Probably one of the best defenders they had on the team. He led the team in 6.5 sacks, had a non-contact leg injury that ended up becoming an Achilles injury. He had to leave midway through the fourth quarter, and like I said, it was later confirmed that it's an Achilles injury. So Jalen Phillips will be out for the rest of the season. He was a massive pass rush, pass rusher for the Dolphins. So that's going to be a major blow for them going down the line, but we'll see how they can recoup. Steelers, Bengals. I think we talked about this as well. Steelers totaled 421 yards of offense, snapping their streak of 58 games without gaining 400 yards. So Matt Canada being out of OC for the Steelers did seem to pay some dividends for the team. Kenny Pickett played pretty well, all things considered. Throwing in the middle of the ball, throwing in the middle of the field, the Steelers, Pat Freiermuth had a career outing, career high of 120 yards. Najee Harris looked pretty good too. He kind of looked back to his old ways, 15 rushes for 99 yards and a score as well. And then my only other takeaway, obviously, is Bengals just are not the same without Joe Burrow.
No,
but it's a shame.
I gotta say this too. This is probably my snooze.
It was
snooze fest of the week. I mean, I didn't. I
just assumed it was the Giants and Patriots.
But,
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
It was a snooze.
But
yeah, for that too. But I would say Steelers and Bengals was pretty much my snooze fest. As much as the Steelers, had a lot of yards with Kenny Pickett and with Najee Harris almost having 100 yards. I still don't think the Steelers are that good, to be honest. And I don't think and I thought that game was an absolute snoozer. I think the Steelers, Kenny Pickett's stats don't make sense, and stats don't make sense 100% of the time. I'll talk about stats in the new week's resolutions, but 278 yards.
Yeah.
He hasn't thrown an interception in 6 straight games, Kenny Pickett, and he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass. It's the weirdest stat line ever. Are the Steelers purposefully doing that to him, or is Kenny Pickett just?
Well, now we're gonna get to find out because Matt Canada's not there. Can't put that as an excuse anymore. So I guess over the next 6 games or so, we're gonna find out how good Kenny Pickett actually is.
Yeah, I saw that too, Justin. It was like 208 passing attempts without an interception, which I could have swore he threw interceptions, but I guess he just seems like he has thrown interceptions this year, but obviously I'm wrong. Well, recently, I should say. Recently he's thrown interceptions, but obviously I'm wrong. Yeah, I think, obviously Goff was leading that torch with the pass attempts without an interception.
He's making up for it now.
Now it's Kenny Pickett's. Yeah, it's Kenny Pickett's now. So we'll see what happens. My take when I saw this was you can argue almost that he should have more interceptions. Yep. Kenny Pickett. That might be the problem for the Steelers. They don't do anything.
That's exactly right. It's like Alex Smith when he was the Chiefs quarterback. Like Alex Smith was very good, but Alex Smith didn't throw a lot of interceptions because he was checking the ball down a lot instead of throwing the ball downfield. Yeah, I mean that's what they need him to do more, is be more aggressive with the ball. And I mean, this was the Steelers' first game, obviously, all year where they weren't outgained finally, and so maybe that's what they have to start doing. And I think Kenny Pickett definitely showed flashes of it this game, being more aggressive. Like I said,
throwing in the middle of the field way more. Pat Frymuth, like I said, had an awesome game. A lot of passes in the middle of the field, and I actually saw a lot of bombs from Kenny Pickett this game as well. He had a lot of, I mean, they were off kilt a little bit. They weren't thrown very well, but I still did see a lot of nice deep throws from Kenny Pickett, and I like to see it. And I know for a fact the Steeler fans want to see it. Buccaneers, Colts, we did touch on that as well. Saints, Falcons, did we touch on this? I don't think we really touched on this too much. Desmond Ridder didn't play too well. New Orleans, pretty much explosive on offense.
They gave Bijan the ball. How about that? Good things happen.
16 rushes. Yeah, 16 rushes, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Only 6 more than Algier, who had 10 for 64 as well. So, yes, Algier and Robinson combined, what is that? Don't do math now, but I think it was like over close to 150 total yards. So that's, definitely feed your stars. We've been saying it all year for the Atlanta, and they finally did it. Took the ball out of Ritter's hand and just let it, let the running backs for the team kind of take over. And like you said, Zach, it has good results, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Atlanta's defense also kind of keeping them in games. Jesse Bates is the leader of that defensive squad. I mean, he had Atlanta's first pick 6 of the season. He also had a big late third quarter hit that forced a fumble out of Taysom Hill that ended up helping Atlanta seal the win. So yeah, Jesse Bates on the defensive side of the ball, leading the defense for Atlanta. And the other part of the success recipe for success is, of course, feeding the running backs the ball, feeding the stars the ball, and getting the ball out of Ritter's hand as much as possible. You do those two things, they win. Panthers Titans, I think we touched on this a little bit. My only other real thing I know we talked about it with Frank Reich obviously being fired at the start of the show. Panthers are really bad. Derrick Henry played really, really good. Henry became the 8th running back in NFL history to run for at least 9,000 yards and at least 80 touchdowns before turning 30. Henry is pretty much the entire offense for the Titans. My only other takeaway were the Titans finally were able to come back home. Titans, as we know, have an awful away record this year. I was actually shocked when I saw this. This was just the 4th home game for the Titans all year, which I knew that obviously, but it's the only home game they've had over the last 7 weeks. So this was their first home game they've had over the last 7 weeks for the Titans. And of course, Titans are 4-0 now after this weekend when playing at Nissan Stadium. Can't win away, but are very, very explosive at home. But of course, that away record is something they're going to have to look forward fix going into the next season, have any chance to be a contending team. Jaguars, Texans, we already talked about. Chiefs, Broncos, I know we already talked about as well. I don't really think we missed anything else. Ravens, Chargers.
Yeah. No franchise in the
Sunday.
NFL has historically done less with more than the Chargers.
Ravens,
Go back to Phillip Rivers, go back to LaDainian Tomlinson, Drew Brees, all the great players they had, and they never won anything, and you're seeing it happen again. The Chargers have Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen. Talent-wise, the Chargers are up there with just about anybody in the NFL. But every single year, they just, whether it's turnovers, whether it's bad defense, it's something always gets in the way for the Chargers. They never can get out of their own way. And Brandon Staley, again, he's just coaching out the string because he's not coming back next year. And give credit to the Ravens for figuring out a way to win a low-scoring kind of game. And I think the most surprising aspect of this is Justin Tucker actually missed a field goal.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes.
The Chargers are the most underachieving team in the NFL and probably in the history of their franchise. Go back to San Diego. Wasting all that talent.
Yep.
And, and you got Brandon Staley. Yeah. Please go back to San Diego. And your fan base is there, too. SoFi is just
let's be real. We all still call them the San Diego
stadiums, not the Rams and Chargers.
If nothing else, by accident, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like the Redskins.
True.
Yeah, and it's because people. What happens is people. The reason it's always so many opposing fans is because people will just make vacations around, their game. So if the Raiders come into town, people are just they're not really far away, but even if like a East Coast team comes to SoFi, fans are just going to make vacations. Yeah, they're going to make vacations out of them coming, that time of the year, especially if it's a cold, a cold time of the year, like, this time of the season. they're going to make vacation plans out of that and then just go to the games. So yeah, it's just that nice weather, and LA will do that to you. Will make a lot of opposing fans, especially when it's the Chargers and they don't have a really loyal fan base in LA yet. New Week's resolutions. Let's move on to New Week's resolutions. Zach, what was your New Week's resolution?
Yeah, my New Week's resolution is going to be, for the love of God, New England, just bench Mac Jones already. Just admit that the experiment is over. Mac Jones is not your future quarterback. Get ready to draft Caleb Williams, Drake May, whoever it's going to be next year, and just admit that this whole thing is over. Bill Belichick should not be fired. You need to make a quarterback change. And just play Bailey Zappi the rest of the season. Play whoever. Mac Jones clearly is not the guy anymore.
Yeah, mine was going to be stop throwing the ball, which is basically the same thing. That's my New Week's resolutions. The combination of Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, absolutely awful. Bailey Zappi at least showed flashes last year. Zappi, like I said, he had a very, very bad game yesterday. 54 yards, 1 interception. Offense overall looked atrocious. They looked promising in the run game, specifically giving the ball to Ramondre Stevenson. Like I said earlier in the show, he was the only offense the Patriots had all game long, 21 times, again, I'll reiterate, 21 times had the ball, 98 yards and a touchdown. So yeah, I don't know what the Patriots do, but kind of the build off you, Zach, what you said for your New Week's resolution, they have to just stop throwing the ball, try to stop the bleeding as much as they can this year. And stop the bleeding and stop throwing the ball. Wait till next year. Get Caleb Williams maybe, and build around a new team, a new offense. Justin, what is your New Week's resolution?
My New Week's resolution is the stats during the NFL games. I thought CBS during the Bills-Eagles games, and not just that game, but other games previously, were kind of cramming the stats down our throat, just throwing it up on the screen, throwing it up. Oh, look at this stat. Look at that stat. Third down conversions. I mean, sometimes you would have thought that the Eagles were one of the worst offenses in the league and with overinflated stats. And then this team has overinflated stats. And then that team has overinflated stats. But then in reality, or underinflated stats, and then they're that good. But it's not just yesterday's Bills-Eagles games. It's other games. They got to stop
I'm okay with it. I like it. I like analytics, but they can definitely – my problem is, like you just alluded to, Justin, they can make a stat for anything.
Yeah.
They can absolutely find a stat in any niche and cranny they want to. They have – they probably have 4 or 5 interns that's only their job is to just make stats during a game, during a broadcast.
This is the first time Jalen Hurts has ever done this at 7:35 on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. No, it really does get ridiculous sometimes. It's like it's the first time someone has ever done something, in their first 9 games before the age of 25 or something. They can always they always find ways to make a stat, just to kind of fill up the dead air, fill up some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they could do the analytics, but they got to stop.
If they're good, like I said, if they're good stats, I'm all for it. But when they're clearly just made up to fill the void, that becomes a lot. Let's move on though, guys. Bob Ferrante, reporter and covers FSU exclusively. Covers FSU exclusively in Tallahassee. Going to break down the Seminoles in their season so far, but especially in light of the college football rankings that are going to be coming out tonight. Obviously, Jordan Travis out for the year. They just had their game this past week against Florida. Going to see how that all plays out, how all that incorporates, into the rankings coming up tonight, and what they do if they do make the playoffs, how they're going to fare in the playoffs, how they're going to fare in the bowl game that they get. Everything coming up with him now. Great interview, and without further ado, let's head on to Tallahassee and talk to Bob. Okay, we now head to Tallahassee and talk to Bob Ferrante from the Osceola magazine. Bob, been there since 2010, you said. No FSU football inside and out. had to have you on in light of these college football playoff rankings, the second to last rankings that are coming out in lieu of championship weekend. FSU currently at number 5, outside looking in. Obviously, Jordan Travis down a couple weeks ago. We'll get into that as well. I want to get your opinion, start off right off the bat. What do you think about these rankings coming up tonight? Do you think there's any chance that FSU might make the top 4? And if not, what do they have to do this weekend against Louisville to ensure that they get a spot in the top 4 next week?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I think the challenge with these rankings are they're made to be transparent early on, but they're also made to evaluate teams on a week by week basis. So I think all along we kind of felt like Ohio State and Michigan were going to play each other, and the winner of that game was going to survive and be in the top 4, and the loser would probably drop out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we're all kind of looking forward to now is the CFP made an adjustment based on, hey, Washington was looking better than Florida State. They did say that Jordan Travis's injury didn't have a factor in it, but I think optically, we all know that people are human and they judge based on what they see with their eyes, and they needed to see a prove it moment from Florida State, right? So it had to be Tate Rodemaker, the run game, the defense, everything went down in the swamp, beat the Gators. So I think once they did, and once it wasn't like a super close game down the wire, you felt like, hey, you're one of the 4 unbeaten Power 5s, you're in. And I think that's the way it's going to probably shake out. Where is Florida State? Are they 4? Are they 3? Who knows? But I think at this point, Mike Norvell's just said, if you win, you're in. When the rankings matter the most. And what he's saying is, after the conference championship games, when they matter the most, he felt like all along Florida State was going to be in.
Do you think there's any chance they can get knocked out after next weekend? Say they struggle against, obviously they have to beat Louisville, obviously, to make it. But what if they struggle against Louisville? Do you think there's any chance they might be kicked out? The final rankings that we're going to have next week.
And that's the other argument that we've made too, is what's valued by the committee. Like we can say it's the eye test, we can say it's optics, we can say it's metrics, but there are some coaches on this committee, and that's what I've always pointed to is coaches should say the wins on the field are what matters. And regardless of who you have, regardless of your injuries, shouldn't those wins substantiate your resume more than, hey, you don't have the maybe Heisman Trophy finalist in Jordan Travis?
Right.
My argument still is this is a really good team. It's maybe not a team that's going to match up incredibly well against Georgia or Michigan. So if you're saying it from that standpoint, okay, I'm fine with you saying Florida State may not be able to beat Georgia, may not be able to beat Michigan. But if you're saying what's one of the best 4 teams out of the regular season, and then the conference championship games, Florida State's resume holds up incredibly well. Then there's the Alabama argument. Then there's the what if Oregon beats Washington argument. I mean, it gets really, really silly because we're in this last year of the 4-team playoff. I mean, that's where we are for this one final kind of ride of this 4-team CFP.
So you're basically saying that because Jordan Travis went down, you guys were still able to handle your, those couple of games that he was out. Obviously, you think that actually should be weighted heavier because the team was able to get a win, a couple wins here, regardless of, the Heisman, candidate Travis, like you were saying.
I've kind of used this line all along, and it's just how I view teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there are perfect teams in college football right now. I mean, you guys watch a lot of football. You watch Georgia. Are they perfect? Watch Michigan. Are they perfect? Florida State ain't perfect either. They just have a perfect record. They have found ways at Florida State to win games with flaws. And right now, the big flaws are, yes, some injuries on the offensive line. Yes, Jordan Travis is out for the year. I also think teams should get credit for winning all their games. Do I get the Alabama argument? Sure. I can get behind Oregon. Oregon's a really good football team. It was just, a play or 2 less than Washington. I don't have a problem with Oregon being up there. But to some extent, you also have to say you won all your games. And I think that's pretty substantial.
Do you think
How has the team handled the Jordan Travis injury?
Yeah, it's been kind of, honestly, this feels weird because like I think most programs you would say, okay, the quarterback, he's the leader, he's the senior, it's important. But I think it goes a layer deeper than that. I mean, he's kind of the heart and soul of the team in a sense because he was the guy who didn't have confidence. I think you all have kind of heard the story, what's been written. I mean, he was a guy who literally his first practice here, he was throwing bounce passes to wide receivers. It was not good. He was not a good practice competitive guy. And he went all the way from that to a 3,000-yard passer to almost the Heisman Trophy presentation if he doesn't get injured. That's a really remarkable journey. How they handled it, they've done a lot of fight for 13 t-shirts. The hashtag has been trending on Twitter. The team has really, I think, used Jordan's injury as a motivating factor for them. They've rallied around Tate Rodemaker. They've rallied around other players. Yeah, it's a team that I think feels hurt by it. I mean, genuinely, the emotions on the field when Jordan Travis went down in that game. I mean, there were guys crying. There were guys literally, and not because they thought, well, our national championship hopes are dashed. It was, that's our guy. That's our guy on the ground. I think they knew the severity of the injury in that moment. They knew when you see the air cast come on, when you see the cart coming out, they knew how bad it was, and they genuinely hurt for him. But I think they've tried to do their best to make him feel like he's still part of this ride that they're on, and see how far they can go.
So you said the committee, from what you hear from the committee, is that they're not taking into account Travis being injured for their rankings, for their voting. They're not really putting that into consideration. They're looking at the team as a whole, and not specifically looking at the team with Jordan Travis being out.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what they choose to vote could be a different story. And I think we'll find out tonight. Again, what I've said is you take wins over rivals, whether they're by 1 point or 25 points. In the optics world, the committee, they might literally be looking for more, but to some extent, this is what Florida State is. They've always kind of been this year a really shaky first half team, but have made great adjustments late in the game, great adjustments coming out of the half. I don't have their scores in front of me, like from a third quarter, fourth quarter standpoint, but you look at the aggregate, what they score in the third quarter, what they score in the fourth quarter, it's light years ahead of their opponents. And also the defense, this is a defense that's been criticized for years and years for what they aren't. They haven't given up more than 20 points in the last 2 months. They gave up 24 points to a decent Clemson team. So they kept everybody under 30. So it's kind of more than just Jordan. I think it's just a body of work of a really good team. But again, respectfully, it's not, this doesn't feel like the 2013 Florida State team that was rolling past everybody en route to the title. So I think we can all admit there are flaws for Florida State in just about every team.
But it sounds like you do think tonight Florida State will be one of the 4 teams in the rankings. And that being said, kind of a follow-up question on that. What do you think is the possibility of Ohio State coming in, knocking them off, and potentially maybe even Alabama, Texas? Like, do you see a path that if Florida State does be one of the top 4 teams tonight, is it simply, win against Louisville this weekend and they're in, or is there potential that even a team above them, like, could you see a path for a team that's ranked higher than them to, knock them out come next week?
So I think the easy answer for tonight is I think Florida State's at least number 4. Mm-hmm. Now, the next question becomes what happens after conference championship weekend. And then you get into that chaos theory that I think ESPN and some of the other news outlets are floating. So what happens if Alabama beats Georgia? Then does Georgia have a right to say the number 4 spot while Alabama might push up higher than Georgia? You start getting into these various chaos theories. Mm-hmm. I think Oregon could and should beat Washington, right? So what claim does Oregon have? These are all the great debates when you're in a 4-team playoff. And next year we might go to 12, and somebody is going to say, well, we're 13 and we didn't deserve to be 13. We deserve to be 11. Well, that's a totally separate discussion. And I think we're never going to see 12 or 13 win a national title, just the way the college football landscape is now. But it's going to be interesting to see how the college, because I do think we could see shifting after the championship games is kind of my honest answer.
No, you're definitely right. I mean, you're right. Debating between 4 and 5 and 12 and 13 is a big difference, like you said. And unfortunately, that's why I think this whole college football playoff landscape is such a hotly debated topic, and why people like talking about it while ESPN likes, covering it so much, is because I do think it has so much debate, embedded into it. And like you said, all the chaos theories, people love talking about the what if scenarios, everything that can happen. But yeah, you go back to Oregon and Washington, and I've been saying the whole year pretty much that I think whoever's going to win the Pac-12 will get into the playoffs. So, if that's Washington wins out, they're going to be in. And then I think if Oregon beats Washington, then Oregon will, shift Washington out. But that's an interesting point you make about Georgia and Alabama, though. So, yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see because, with a 4-team playoff structure, unfortunately, the way it's set up now is there's always going to be teams, at least 3-4 teams this year, at least, if not 5-6. There's going to be, a lot of teams that are really good teams that deserve to make the playoffs. And I think it's interesting to say that, or interesting to hear that you might think Georgia and Alabama could have a potential to be in next week if Alabama was to beat Georgia this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can sell myself in full on 2 SEC teams in. I think not having one SEC team in, like say Alabama beats Georgia, is the committee really going to say, well, Georgia's not deserving and Alabama is also not deserving? Then you have Texas on the outside, and Texas is in a pretty decent spot. Obviously, they've beaten Alabama. So Texas is going to start to look and say, well, how can Alabama get in, but we can't as Texas? Again, these are the nuances of this 4-team argument, and you start getting into the chaos discussion. I think the cleanest way to play this out is Georgia wins, Washington beats Oregon, Florida State takes care of business, and the blocks kind of stay where they are, right about where we think they're going to fall Tuesday night. But man, we know these conference championship games, crazy things have happened. They're on neutral fields. Who knows?
Do you think the committee, the committee would love that to happen, what you just admitted. I mean, the committee would love all the teams in the top 4 just to win out this weekend and make it easy on them. But do you think the committee wanted Michigan to lose this past weekend just to make it easier on the decision to, have them in or not? Because that's something we debated on this show, in the past week, where the committee, obviously they have to deal with the sign stealing scandal. They have to deal with everything else, that's coming along with Michigan, all the baggage that they have. And obviously if Ohio State would have beat them this past week, and all that would have gone away. So do you think the committee was kind of hoping for Michigan to lose this past weekend to kind of make the decision easier on them?
I think they'll never admit it, right?
Right.
But would it have been cleaner for Michigan to lose? And to some extent, do you give a little bit of credit to the Wolverines for what they've done with assistant coaches filling in?
Definitely.
I mean, some people are saying that coaching staff deserves maybe collectively to be the Big Ten coaches of the year, instead of, say, I'm forgetting what's the Northwestern coach, Braun, I think is his name. But anyway, there's an argument for what Michigan has done without Harbaugh these last 3 games. I get that too. What does the committee want in the end? I think they're almost tasked with an impossible job. But it's a really weird one too, where their athletic director is on the committee and then has to recuse himself of any conversation that happens when Michigan pops up, which to me is kind of ridiculous, because how do you do that, not just when Michigan is in the discussion, but in this kind of controversial part of the discussion, as far as, okay, was Connor Stallions out there and for how many games? And literally, it is breaking the rules that have been in place for 30 or more years. You can't be on another team's field, another team's stadium, taking iPhone photos or videos of signs or whatnot. Now, if a coach says, hey, I want to see the TV copy. I want to try and steal signs off the TV copy of what ESPN says. There's nothing wrong with that. You might say it's unethical, but it's part of the game. I think we've all kind of accepted that is a weird part of the game, just like baseball has had sign stealing around for more than a century. I mean, it's an unfortunate part of it. The Houston Astros with banging the trash cans. I mean, we've just had this kind of garbage sort of around sports forever. Yes, if Michigan had lost, I think the CFP would have gone, man, that really does make our jobs easier.
No, yeah, and it's people, teams, organizations always going to try to find ways to get as much as they can out of the rule book, right? As they're always going to try to find loopholes, always going to try to find ways to tweak it as much as they possibly can in order to get that even a little bit of an advantage is still a big advantage, especially, with Michigan and how much expectations they have every year. And speaking of that, I mean, one of the things we talked about with Michigan all year long was they didn't really play anyone tough. Their schedule was really easy leading up until Penn State, and kind of alluding to what you just said, Bob. I mean, with a backup coach, with their secondary coach, they were able to beat Penn State and Ohio State. So I do think, despite the kind of controversy they have around the team, they still were really good wins with a backup coaching squad. And I think that actually it might end up helping them even more in the committee's favor. What are your overall thoughts on next year, though, going to the 12-team playoff? How do you like that? What do you feel about that? I think it's overall pretty well received by a lot of people, but do you also kind of feel that way, especially being an someone that covers FSU pretty heavily? I mean, they're a team that's often, just on the outside looking in. So I'm sure you're very thrilled next year to have the expansion, the 12 teams in the playoffs, huh?
I think last year too, in 2022, this was a team that would have been right on the edge of making a 12-team playoff. So I do think a lot of fans looked at it and said that would have been really cool just to kind of see the matchups and maybe the opportunities there. Who knows what this team's going to look like next year, for example. There's going to be a lot of departures. Obviously, Jordan's out of eligibility. We can see Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Jared Verse. I mean, you think about all of the big name, impactful guys on this team. We can see a lot of those guys depart. So if you're looking at it from a Florida State standpoint, you might say, well, the Seminoles may not be in the top 4 in 2024, but you have a really good shot to be in that top 12 if you hit the portal again. And they've hit the portal really at a high batting average at Florida State. I think that's been a tremendous storyline for Mike Norvell. Is he's not just grabbing guys. He's grabbing guys who are the right fits. They've gotten the production, the leadership. So from that aspect, I think it is good potentially for a Florida State. Could it be good for a Louisville or a Clemson, looking at some other schools around the conference, just to get a second ACC team in? Could it be good for the SEC? I mean, the SEC might say, we think we have 4 or 5 of the top 12 in the country, which I think is going to be something that's going to piss off a lot of fans nationally. Mm-hmm. But if that's the way it goes, then so be it. I mean, they've got potentially 4 or 5 of the best 12. And then next year, Ohio State, Michigan, you'll probably see both of those guys in it. Who knows what happens with the Pac-12? It's going to break up. Oregon and Washington could be over playing in the Big Ten. How many Big Ten schools could we see? So I think it's just going to might make the conference championship games, honestly, of less importance, unless it's just purely based on seeding, because you could still see both of those two schools get in the 12-team playoff.
Absolutely.
On the flip side, I have to add, your top 4 are going to get buys. So there will be a race to those top 4 slots, even if we see the conference championship games maybe not meaning just as much as they have previously.
Let's, I mean, you kind of just alluded to it now, but what are your thoughts on the ACC going forward in general with all these conference realignments? Is there a kind of concern in the ACC about maybe 4 or 5 years from now taking the path of the Pac-12, maybe not doing enough right now to make them a competitive product and kind of becoming one of the conferences on the wayside? Because I think a lot of people are expecting, and the ones that are outside looking in are fearful of a dominant 2-conference college football landscape, maybe in like 4 or 5 years, if not 10 years. I don't know how long it's going to take, but whether that be the SEC and the Big Ten and that's it, or is there concern with ACC fans, ACC teams, that if we don't do enough now, if we don't broker the deals now, we might find ourselves in a conference that's failing. Give it 4 or 5 years from now.
It's an interesting debate because I think if you ask a lot of Florida State fans, they would say the ACC has already failed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is rooted in a lot of issues. The grant of rights extending through 2036, which I don't even want to think about how old I'm going to be or if I'm going to be covering college football in 12 years. It's a long way off. Now, in theory, you can't leave the conference without giving up your broadcast rights in addition to hundreds of millions of dollars, which not many booster bases can afford to raise that kind of just crazy money.
Mm-hmm.
But let's play it out. Let's say, like you said, 4 or 5 years down the road, what if Florida State's still really darn good and Clemson's really good too, but the money ain't coming in? At some point, you might get administrators and boosters and board of trustees members who say, okay, the gap has narrowed to the point where we almost have to pay that money to get out, to go to, like you said, the super conference. And whether Florida State and Clemson and say North Carolina, maybe Georgia Tech, maybe Virginia, who knows if they're better fits in the Big Ten or the SEC. I've got my own opinions, but it may just be you want to get to that conference that has the best payout, that has the best TV deal, that gives you the best shot to compete, not just in football, but it's in every other sport. And look, I know a lot of people don't care, but Florida State's playing in the Women's Soccer College Cup.
Mm-hmm.
To keep a good soccer program going, you need revenue. To keep a good women's basketball program going, you need revenue. So this is a football discussion, but it's so much about every other sport at Clemson, at Virginia. North Carolina's got what great field hockey, women's soccer, everything that's great about Carolina. That all matters from the what money's coming in the front door standpoint. But you have to also think about it this way too. If your rival that you're competing against is, say, Georgia, Florida, LSU, they've got better facilities, they've got more money, they can pay more for head coaches, they can pay way more for assistant coaches. Think about all those dynamics. I mean, your human capital can be poached if you don't have the kind of money to compete on a, say, year in, year out. So I think going back to your question, short term, Florida State, Clemson, whoever, they can survive. They can make it work. They can fundraise. As long as you're selling tickets, you got a ton of money coming in. It's enough. It's maybe not as much as your competitors. It's that long-term argument. Man, the long-term doesn't look all that good. I mean, it's like you've got sunny days, but you see the horizon and it's all cloudy and it's all just that nasty thunderstorm because you know kind of what you're flying into, and it's just going to be a lot of rocky, flights and landings for sure.
No, that's an interesting part of it because even the men's teams, you mentioned women's teams a lot, but even a lot of the men's teams need that money, need that revenue from football. I mean, it's kind of analogous to like hospitals, right? I mean, they say that all hospitals kind of work at a deficit besides surgery. It's kind of a similar idea, right? For athletic programs to run, they need that revenue from football. And so you got to make sure that you play out these TV deals smartly to make sure that your team can still have enough money to support its whole athletic program and not just the football program. I mean, you look at the Pac-12 this year, one of the reasons the reason the Pac-12 is disbanding is because they couldn't reach a TV deal. And so let's hope that the ACC can figure out something over the next couple of years here. But it sounds like you do think the ACC will be disbanded eventually at some point. So from what you're saying.
I wouldn't exactly say disbanded. I think I would put the context of it as I will think, let's say 2030, I could see Florida State, Clemson. We've always thought North Carolina and Virginia are something of a package deal. Virginia Tech, somewhat of a package deal based on their politics. I think we'll see some schools really test that grant of rights and arguably go to court over it. The difficulty there is we've never really seen this true contract to see what's in the language. And I think all lawyers are willing to go to court, But until you know what's in that language and you know what you're up against legally, can you go to court and win it? For the ACC to survive long term, you got to go to ESPN and say, we've got great schools in here right now, and they're competitive, but they can't stay competitive 4 or 5 years down the road. How do you help us? How do you help us collectively? How do you help those kind of big brand schools? So is the Pac-12 case sort of the canary in the coal mine where UCLA and Southern Cal were trying and then just said, hey guys, we're not going to Apple TV and Ion Distribution Network or whatever was discussed before everything broke apart.
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a little bit of they're seeing what's happened around the landscape and they're saying, okay, we've got a little bit of time to figure this out. But the ball's in ESPN's court in the end. Like, you've got a contract and you're almost going back to ESPN and saying, we love you and we love your money, but you're not giving us enough money.
Right.
So how can we get more? And that's tough when ESPN's even struggling too. So it's there aren't easy solutions. I think we've hit all the easy solutions for money, and now we're going into the kind of those harder discussions.
How do you think the ACC did this year? Just overall, do you think they managed expectations? Did even better? Did worse? I mean, because Duke, North Carolina, both kind of were teams that started out really, really hot, really nice, and now, they kind of went off a little bit as the year came to an end. But I mean, Clemson obviously didn't play very well. Virginia Tech, even for their standards, and Miami as well, didn't play super well either. So what was your overall takeaway from just the ACC as a conference in general this year, especially just, again, in light of all the conference realignments we just had, this year coming in, and then especially next year?
I think Louisville was sort of the dark horse in this conference to do well because their schedule didn't have Florida State or Clemson in the regular season. Everybody thought, well, Jeff Brom's going to come in, hit the portal, and he could be really good right away. And he was. Good job by Louisville, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Clemson issue is they lost too many games early. We saw the flaws in Clemson. Good job on them for rallying, but 8-4 doesn't really get it done in the national picture.
Right.
I think what the ACC really needs, yes, it's great what Mike Elko did at Duke, and it got him a job at Texas A&M. What the ACC needs is for Clemson to be really, really good, and that brand needs to be top 10, top 15. It needs a Miami to be similarly. It needs North Carolina to have a Drake May, but also a defense that can back him up and be top 10, top 15 good. It's a cool story when like Wake and Dave Clawson do great, because we all, look at cute little Wake and what they're doing and how many wins they have. They're great stories, but I'm not sure nationally that really moves the needle enough for a fan watching, say, 8 states away, right? So it's about brands, unfortunately. And I think that's where the ACC is. You've got to figure out a way to make your brands the best in their respective sports. And I will say it's also about men's basketball too. Like, you need North Carolina to be really good in men's basketball, and Duke and Virginia. And Miami's done a great job in men's hoops, obviously, too. But it's all about your brands, I think, being the best that they can be. And Miami wasn't good enough. I don't think we expected Miami to go win 10 games, right? But they could have done a little bit better than what they had done.
Sure. Do you consider ACC a basketball school mostly?
A basketball conference mostly?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think outside of Florida State and Clemson circles, I think most fans will say we care about basketball much more than football.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Jim Phillips first got here as the commissioner, he often said, that's got to change. That mindset, you can be as good as you want to be in basketball. That's great, but you've got to be better in football. So we have seen schools that have elevated through coaching hires. Like, again, Mike Elko was a great hire for Duke. They've got to go do it again. Football has to be so good in this conference that the stigma of the ACC changes. And I think nationally, outside of the ACC's states, I do think there's a lot of people who say, outside of Florida State and Clemson, I don't know who Florida State and Clemson are beating, for example. Like, I think there's a lot of viewpoints of it's not good enough. Those wins over other ACC schools don't stack up nearly like the SEC wins do.
Yep.
But we're seeing that perception too with Michigan, like you mentioned earlier. Who did Michigan really beat that was very, very good up until that Penn State game, up until the Ohio State game? So they're even facing a perception issue. So I think it's about building that, was it the depth of your conference?
Yep.
It's something that all of these conferences have to figure out.
Well, Bob, this has been amazing. I do want to ask you one more question. Leading into, Louisville, and then hopefully, either Sugar Bowl and then Rose Bowl, whatever it may be. Hopefully, the weeks after that. What does Florida State have to do, just in general, going back to the football team and kind of logistically, specifically speaking about the football team in general? Like, what do they have to do to ensure that they can, have success coming down here going into December?
I think against Louisville, I've often said that you have to play well around the quarterback. It's not just the quarterback's job to win you games, to put you in position to win games. With a backup quarterback, even though a guy who's been here 4 years, you have to play really, really well around Tate Rodemaker. It's about the run game. It's about not dropping passes. It's about making the acrobatic catches that we know Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson can make. Defense got to make some stops. I mean, defense is going to have to straight up shut down that run game of Louisville. Shut down is probably the wrong word to say, but I mean, you have to make enough stops, enough 3-and-outs. You don't want to be in a shootout with Louisville. This game gets into the 30s. That's not the neighborhood of a Florida State without Jordan Travis.
Right.
Lower scoring is going to be better. Now, will they make the playoff? I do think they'll beat Louisville. And that's not just me being a guy who covers Florida State. I think they're just a better team. Yes, you take Jordan Travis out, you have a lot of questions about Florida State, but I do think they'll play well enough around Tate. I think if you win this kind of game against Louisville, say 27-20, I think you take it. You take your ACC trophy. You say that's good enough for the college football playoff committee. They're in. I will argue, though, I'm not sure how great they match up against Michigan or Georgia without a Jordan Travis. Fully admit it, because you have to ask that question, right? I mean, you have to ask how that team looks without a Jordan Travis. And that's the unfortunate reality, but it shouldn't discredit you got to 12-0 and you might get to 13-0. I think those have value to just how well the season played out.
So it sounds like, I mean, people know that Rodemaker's not as good as Travis, but it's not really the issue of people don't trust in Rodemaker. They just understand that he's not as good as Travis. It's kind of like an in-between. It's not a we have no faith in Rodemaker, but we just know he's not as good as Travis. He's kind of like an in-between from no faith to, taking us to the promised land.
I say it this way. There's a luxury to having a fourth-year backup, a guy who's been in practice for 4 years. When you look at a college football team now and they lose a quarterback, like Florida played Max Brown, a redshirt freshman. You look at how many redshirt freshmen are having to be thrown in out there because of an injury or because of some other circumstance where you just have to throw a guy out there, and he ain't going to be ready with that much practice field time.
Yep.
The issue with Tate is the same issue as every college quarterback. It's dude's only had 100 college throws under his belt. And man, do you want to hire a pilot with thousands of hours in a cockpit, or a pilot who just got his license? And I mean, he just got the license, You want somebody with experience. And I think that's the difference right now, is just Jordan had all that time in the cockpit, whereas Tate's just getting settled in, getting everything buckled in, and he knows what the instruments do. But man, it just doesn't feel the same just yet. That's just the difference. It's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think before he came in to start after Travis's injury, I think he only had one start, and that was a loss, I think, to an FSS team, right? Jacksonville State, if I'm not
back in 2020. It was a long time ago, but man, it shows you he had to wait a long time to get to here.
And he might, I mean, to your point too, and he might be very good. It's just there's not enough tape. There's not enough tape to really say that yet. But I mean, hey, he could be very, very good. It's just time will tell. And I'm rooting for Florida State. I really am. I hope they do well this weekend in Louisville, and then ultimately end up going to the football playoffs. Bob, I really do. No,
It's been fun to watch. It has.
No, yeah, fun team to watch for sure. And like I said, I am rooting for the ACC as well, just in general. And so to have a team go to the playoffs this year from the ACC would be awesome, would be fantastic. Well, Bob, man, this has been awesome. I really thank you for your time. Really fun talking some Florida State, ACC too. We'll have to do this again sometime. We'll be in touch. Have you on again, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Bob, you take care. All right, we'll talk soon.
You too.
Okay, let's finish up with our intakes and outtakes of the week. Justin, start us off. What is your intake of the week?
My intake of the week is Paul Feinbaum's take, saying Georgia will make it to the college football playoffs, even if they lost to Alabama. Completely agree. Alabama almost losing to Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium, winning 27-24 during that game. And Georgia has been playing much better than Alabama, obviously, and they pretty much earned the right to get the number one seed, especially if they win the SEC championship.
I'm going to go with my intake for the week. Everyone, we've talked about it before on this show as well. Everyone who was saying that the 12-team playoff expansion is good for the college football, I don't think many people are saying it's bad. Maybe the truest, maybe the old school college football fans are saying it, but I know, Zach, you feel the same way. Justin, you like it too. I think it's great for the sport. It's going to be awesome next year. But in particular, you look at this year, I mean, you have teams that are not going to make it, like Texas probably won't make it. Washington might not make it. I mean, you got Alabama might not make it. FSU. You got a lot of these teams that really, really should be making it and just are not going to make it. Teams like OSU, Bama, Texas, Oregon, they might all be penalized for losing a game against a top team and may not have a shot to make up for it when they actually truly are probably the best team, one of the best teams in the nation. But again, they won't be able to showcase that, won't be able to show that this year in the playoffs because it's only 4 teams make it. So I know we've already kind of touched on it at length. I'm just kind of reiterating it again here, but I can't wait for next year. 12-team playoff, going to be great for college football because all these teams that should be in it will actually be in it now, and it's going to be just great for the sport overall.
Yeah.
Zach, what is your intake of the week?
Yeah, how about Texas A&M fans revolting about Mark Stoops? It seemed like he was going to be the head coach of Texas A&M. Like, that's not a guy that if you're going to pay a coach $77 million to go away, that's not a guy you hire. Mike Elko, I think, is a very good coach. Seeing what he did at Duke last year, he won 9 games. This year, they've won 8. And obviously, we know Duke is a really hard place to win. But it just doesn't feel like a home run hire. And Texas A&M's got oil money out the wazoo, as evidenced by how much money they paid Jimbo Fisher. You're going to pay a guy that much money to go away, then you need to hire a home run guy, hire a big-time coach. I think Mike Elko is very good. I'm not sure that he's necessarily a big-time coach worthy of paying a guy $70 million to not coach. So all the Texas A&M fans that revolted, I think in this instance they have a right. If you're gonna go all in, you got to show it. And I'm not sure that Texas A&M has showed that they're going all in.
Would you say this, that Hugh Freeze would have been a better hire?
As long as Hugh Freeze doesn't bring his defensive coordinator to call whatever the hell that was on 4th and goal at the 30.
Yeah. No, I think he would have been.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze is a very good coach.
Yeah. Outtakes. Justin, what is your outtake of the week?
My outtake of the week is Stephen A. Smith saying he is concerned about the Lions. I know we've kind of touched on that, but I wouldn't be too concerned about the Lions' future. But for this year, obviously, I would be concerned for their chances as a Super Bowl contender in the NFC, especially going in, as I said, to Philadelphia.
Zach, you might have the same outtake, but I'm going to go with people saying that Ryan Day should be fired from Ohio State after losing this past weekend. Day is 56-7 all time OSU. 10-5 against ranked opponents. Yes, 0-3 against Michigan at this time, but definitely leading the team in the right direction. He's led this program to the playoffs, obviously, and continuously has put up impressive seasons his entire time there. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely the right option for OSU right now. Not going to get a better coach than Ryan Day. Yes, people are upset, especially Ohio State fans. Zach, I know, are probably upset him losing to Michigan 3 times now.
They're not
but
thrilled.
Again, no, not thrilled. But his resume is still impressive. I know that's kind of would you say as an Ohio State fan that's the only game that matters, Zach, all season?
Yeah. Oh,
The
yeah.
Michigan game? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, especially with how good they are, because they're expected to win every other game. But yeah, like I said, 56-7 his whole time at OSU, and then 10-5 against ranked opponents. So still pretty good. Definitely the right guy for Ryan Day. I mean, would you say that, Zach? I mean, you're the Ohio State fan.
I'll save my thoughts for Wednesday because I've got plenty of
Okay.
them.
So you might not think that then. All right.
I'm mixed. I don't know.
A little bit of a teaser.
I'm not.
Okay.
I don't think he should be fired. No, but
yeah,
I've got other thoughts.
Okay. Coming up on Thursday, then. What is your outtake, though? That wasn't your outtake?
So that makes people make sure you tune in Wednesday. That's what we call a tease in the business. No, my outtake is going to be, everybody that doubted the Broncos. Like, give Sean Payton an apology, give Russell Wilson an apology. These guys know what they're doing. There's a reason Sean Payton is a Super Bowl winning coach, and there's a reason Russell Wilson was a Super Bowl winning quarterback. These guys know what it takes to get it done in this league. And it really is one of the most impressive in-season turnarounds we've seen in a long time. They were 1-5. This is a team that gave up 70 points. The first team that ever gave up 70 points in an NFL game since 1966. And yet this team could make the playoffs. And it's very realistic because their schedule is pretty manageable down the stretch. Their defense is very good. And Russell Wilson is playing with as much confidence as we've seen since he left Seattle. So everybody that doubted the Broncos, that's the outtake this week. This team is absolutely legit. And, 2 AFC West teams might actually make the playoffs, but we all thought it was going to be the Chiefs and Chargers. No, it's going to be the Chiefs, but I think it might be the Broncos.
Yeah, not the Chargers at this point. I mean,
they're in last.
Yeah, and Broncos play the Chargers 2 weeks from now.
Yep.
Texans before that.
That's
right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But yeah, now I'm looking at their schedule now. Overall, pretty manageable. Next week will be the Texans. That's gonna be a tough game, especially with
that defense,
especially with the Texans. Yeah. Well, I think Texans will ultimately win that game. We'll talk about that obviously at length on Saturday. But Texans obviously coming off a loss, they're not going to be very happy about that. They could potentially beat the Chargers twice with how the Chargers are playing. They could probably beat the Chargers twice. Lions 3 weeks from now, that might be a little bit of a tough game, but then they play the Patriots and then the Raiders to finish off the season as well. So yeah, I mean, like we said, I think 9 wins maybe might get an AFC team into the playoffs with a wild card. I know the Dolphins were a 9-team, a 9-win team last year, and they made the playoffs. Yep. So that might at least 10 or at least 9, but maybe 9 might get you in. So we'll see what happens with the Broncos going down here.
9-8 gives you a shot. 10-7 gets you in.
Yep, for sure. All right, guys, good show. We'll be back on Thursday. College football, like we always do, we're going to break down all things college football, recap and preview for for championship weekend coming up. And but until then, we'll talk to you guys on Thursday. But keep on traveling.